The phone rang at 3 in the afternoon on a Thursday, and I knew before I answered that it was Brandon. My son had a particular way of calling, never too early, never too late, always when he needed something but could still pretend it was casual. "Mum," he said, and I could hear the forced brightness in his voice. "My in-laws came from Italy, and they're inviting us to dinner tonight." I set down the gardening shears I'd been using to trim the roses in my backyard. 65 years old, and I could still spend 3 hours on my knees without my back giving out. I was proud of that. "Your future in-laws," I corrected. "You're not married yet." Right. He laughed, but it sounded hollow. "Olivia's parents, Diana and Roberto. They flew in yesterday, and Diana really wants to meet you before the wedding. She suggested Marcello's downtown. 7 o'clock. I looked at the dirt under my fingernails, the smudge of soil on my jeans. 4 hours to make myself presentable for people who probably already had opinions about me. "I'll be there," I said. Brandon exhaled like I'd just agreed to donate a kidney. "Great, thanks, Mum. This really means a lot to Olivia." Not to him, I noticed, to Olivia. I hung up and went inside to shower. The hot water ran down my back and I thought about my son. 38 years old, successful, or so he claimed, and engaged to a woman I'd met exactly 3 times. Each meeting had been brief, polite, and completely devoid of warmth. Olivia Carter was beautiful in that calculated way, with honey-blonde hair and a smile that never quite reached her eyes. She worked in marketing or public relations, or something that involved a lot of talking and not much substance. I dried off and stood in front of my closet. What does one wear to meet Italian in-laws? Something that says, "I raised a good man," without screaming, "I'm trying too hard." I settled on a navy dress, simple and elegant, with a pearl necklace that had been my mother's. Marcello's was the kind of restaurant that had cloth napkins and a sommelier. I arrived exactly on time, a habit from 30 years of teaching high school English, and found Brandon already there, standing near the entrance with Olivia and 2 people I assumed were her parents. Diana Romano was shorter than I'd expected, barely 5'3", but she carried herself like she was 6 feet tall. Her hair was dyed a rich auburn, styled in a way that must have taken an hour and a small fortune. Roberto was beside her, tall and silver-haired, with the kind of casual elegance that comes from generational wealth. "Margaret," Brandon called out, waving me over. He kissed my cheek, and I smelled his cologne, something expensive that Olivia had probably picked out. "Mom, this is Diana and Roberto Romano." Diana extended her hand, and her grip was surprisingly firm. "Such a pleasure," she said. Her English was perfect, with just a hint of an accent that made every word sound more sophisticated than it was. "The pleasure is mine," I replied. Roberto nodded and smiled, saying something quietly in Italian to his wife. Diana laughed, a tinkling sound that reminded me of breaking glass. We were seated at a round table near the window. I ended up between Brandon and Roberto, with Olivia and Diana directly across from me. The waiter brought menus, and for a few minutes, everyone focused on the food options. "The osso buco here is excellent," Diana said, looking at me. "Have you been to Marcello's before?" "Once or twice," I said, "usually for special occasions." "And this is certainly special," Olivia chimed in, reaching over to squeeze Brandon's hand. "Our families finally meeting." Brandon grinned like he'd won the lottery. I watched him, this man I'd raised, and tried to remember when he'd become such a stranger. Was it college? Was it that first job in New York? Or had it been gradual, a slow erosion of the boy I knew into this person who looked at his fiancée like she hung the moon, and at me like I was a distant relative he tolerated out of obligation? We ordered. Diana and Roberto chose in rapid Italian, speaking to the waiter like old friends. Olivia joined in, her Italian smooth and confident. Brandon tried to keep up, stumbling over a few words, and they all laughed indulgently. I said nothing. I simply studied my menu until the waiter looked at me expectantly. I'll have the branzino, I said. Thank you. The first course arrived, calamari for the table. Diana took a piece and turned to Olivia, speaking in Italian. Her tone was conversational, almost gossipy. Olivia responded, also in Italian, and they both glanced at me before laughing. Roberto joined in, saying something that made Diana touch his arm and shake her head, still smiling. Brandon looked confused but laughed anyway, not wanting to be left out. I took a sip of water and set down my glass carefully. They thought I didn't understand. They thought I was just another suburban American mother who'd never left her little bubble. They had no idea that I'd spent a year in Florence when I was 22, or that I'd taught myself 3 languages because I was bored during summer breaks. They had no idea who I was. Diana said something else in Italian, and Olivia covered her mouth, her eyes bright with barely suppressed laughter. I'd had enough. Mi dispiace, I said, my Italian cutting through their conversation like a knife. Non volevo interrompere. Per cosa stiamo ridendo? I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt. What are we laughing about? The silence that fell over the table was absolute. Diana's mouth opened slightly. Olivia's face went pale. Roberto looked at me with something that might have been respect or might have been alarm. Brandon stared. Mum, you speak Italian? Fluently, I said, switching back to English. I smiled at Diana. You were saying something about my dress? I believe the word you used was provincial. I'm happy to clarify my fashion choices if there's any confusion. Diana recovered quickly. I had to give her credit for that. She laughed, waving her hand dismissively. Oh, Margaret, we were just joking. You know how mothers can be about their sons' girlfriends. Fiancés, I corrected, just as I'd corrected Brandon earlier. And yes, I do know how mothers can be. We're very protective. The rest of the dinner was excruciating. The conversation limped along in English, punctuated by long silences and forced politeness. Olivia barely touched her food. Brandon kept trying to start new topics, but everything fizzled out within minutes. I ate my branzino slowly, savoring each bite. It really was excellent. As we waited for dessert, I excused myself to use the restroom. On my way back, I passed near the bar and heard voices, Brandon and Olivia standing in the small corridor that led to the kitchen. She's going to ruin everything, Olivia hissed. Did you see your mother's face? She looked like she wanted to strangle me. She won't ruin anything, Brandon said, but he sounded uncertain. She'll behave at the wedding. She has to. Your mother is a problem, Brandon. My mother was right about her. We need to handle this before she embarrasses us in front of everyone. Before we go any further, take a second to subscribe, hit the hype button and like the video. It really helps the channel grow. And tell us in the comments, what would you do in this situation? I pressed myself against the wall, hidden by a large potted plant. What do you want me to do? Brandon asked. Uninvite her. Don't be stupid, but we need to make sure she knows her place. She's not the center of attention anymore. This is our day, and if she can't accept that, then maybe she shouldn't be in the front row. Brandon didn't argue. He didn't defend me. He just sighed and said, I'll talk to her. I returned to the table before they did. When they came back, both smiling like nothing had happened, I smiled right back. We finished dessert. We said our goodbyes. Diana kissed both my cheeks and told me she looked forward to seeing me at the wedding. I drove home in silence, my hands steady on the wheel. When I got to my house, the house where I'd raised Brandon alone after his father passed away, the house I'd mortgaged twice to pay for his college, I sat in the driveway for 10 minutes, just thinking. They wanted to make sure I knew my place. They thought I was a problem that needed to be handled. I got out of the car, went inside, and poured myself a glass of wine. Then I opened my laptop and started making a list. I woke up Friday morning with a clarity I hadn't felt in months. The anger from the previous night had crystallized into something sharper, more useful. I'd spent 2 hours after the dinner researching, planning, and remembering. Brandon had always been careless. Even as a child, he'd left trails, notes from teachers he'd hidden, report cards he'd altered, evidence of small lies and larger manipulations. He'd gotten better at hiding things as he grew older, but the fundamental pattern remained. He was arrogant enough to believe he was smarter than everyone else, and lazy enough to leave loose ends. I needed to know what those loose ends were now. I called Allie Mackenzie at 9. We'd been friends for 30 years, since our kids had been in the same kindergarten class. Her daughter had moved to California and started a tech company. My son was about to marry a woman who mocked me in Italian. Life wasn't fair. "Maggie," Allie answered on the second ring. "Please tell me you're calling to invite me to brunch." "Better," I said. "I'm calling to hire you." Allie was a private investigator now, after retiring from the police force. She'd spent 25 years solving other people's problems, and she was very good at it. "This sounds serious," she said, and I could hear the interest in her voice. "What do you need?" I told her about the dinner. I told her about the conversation I'd overheard. I told her about the feeling in my gut that said something was deeply wrong with Brandon and Olivia, something beyond the usual wedding stress. "I need to know who they really are," I said. "Both of them. Finances, social media, work history, everything. Can you do that?" "Of course I can," Allie said. "But Maggie, are you sure? Once you start digging, you might not like what you find." "I'm counting on it," I said. She laughed, a sound I'd missed. "Give me 3 days. I'll send you a preliminary report." I spent the rest of Friday doing normal things. I went to the grocery store. I weeded the garden. I returned phone calls from friends who wanted to know about the wedding. I was pleasant and vague, the perfect mother of the groom. Brandon called Saturday morning. "Hey, Mom," he said, and I could tell he was nervous. "About Thursday night?" "What about it?" I asked pleasantly. "I just wanted to make sure you're okay. I know Diana can be a little intense." "Your future mother-in-law is lovely," I lied. "I'm looking forward to getting to know her better." "Oh, good." He sounded relieved and somehow disappointed at the same time. "Olivia was worried you were upset." "Why would I be upset?" "No reason, just, with the language thing and everything. Olivia felt bad about the jokes." "Did she?" I asked. "That's very considerate of her." We talked for a few more minutes about wedding details, the venue, the guest list, the rehearsal dinner. I made appropriate noises and took mental notes. When we hung up, I added Brandon's lies to my growing list. Allie called Tuesday evening. "I'm coming over," she said. "You need to see this in person." She arrived an hour later with a thick folder and a laptop. We sat at my kitchen table, and she opened the folder carefully, like it contained evidence of a murder. "Let's start with Olivia," Allie said. "Olivia Marie Carter, age 35, born in New Haven, Connecticut. Parents divorced when she was 7. Mother remarried Roberto Romano, moved to Italy when Olivia was 12. So Diana isn't her biological mother." "Nope, stepmother. But here's where it gets interesting." Allie pulled out a printout. "Olivia's been engaged twice before. First time when she was 26 to a guy named David Brennan, investment banker. They broke up 6 months before the wedding. Why? No public record, but I talked to some people. Rumor is she found someone with more money." Allie flipped to another page. Second engagement was when she was 31. James Hutchinson, real estate developer. That one ended 3 months before the wedding. "Let me guess," I said. "She found someone with even more money." "Bingo. And now she's found your son." I frowned. Brandon doesn't have that kind of money. He's doing fine, but he's not wealthy. Allie gave me a look I couldn't quite read. "Maggie, when was the last time you actually looked at Brandon's financial situation?" "I don't pry into my son's business." "Maybe you should start." She pulled out more documents. Brandon's been very busy the last 5 years. He started 3 companies. The first 2 failed within 18 months. The third one, Lawson Consulting, has been operating for 2 years. "I know about the consulting business," I said. "He helps companies with digital marketing strategies." That's what he tells people. The reality is more complicated. Ali opened her laptop and turned it toward me. I pulled his business records. Lawson Consulting has exactly 3 clients. All of them are connected to Roberto Romano's business empire. I stared at the screen. What are you saying? I'm saying your son isn't successful because he's brilliant. He's successful because he's marrying into the Romano family. Roberto's been feeding him business for the last 2 years, probably as part of some arrangement with Olivia. The words hit me like cold water. An arrangement. Olivia needed a husband who would fit into her social circle. Someone educated, presentable, American, good for Roberto's business connections here. Brandon needed money and status. It's a transaction, Maggie. A very calculated one. I stood up and walked to the window. My reflection looked back at me, and I barely recognized the woman I saw. When had I become so naive? When had I stopped paying attention? There's more, Ali said quietly. Brandon took out a loan 3 months ago. $200,000. He used your house as collateral. I turned around slowly. He what? Your house, the one your husband left you. Brandon forged your signature on the loan documents. I've already verified it with the bank. If he defaults, you lose the house. My hands were shaking. I clasped them together to make it stop. Why would he need $200,000? Best guess? The wedding. Have you seen the venue they picked? The Plaza Hotel. $1,500 per person, minimum. With their guest list, they're looking at $500,000 easy. I sat back down. The kitchen felt smaller suddenly, the walls pressing in. Can I prove the forgery? I asked. Absolutely. I've already pulled the original documents. Your signature is obviously fake. We could report it tomorrow, have him arrested for fraud. But, Ali closed the laptop, but if you do that, the story goes public. Brandon gets arrested right before his wedding. The whole thing falls apart. You get your house back, but you lose your son completely. I might have already lost him, I said. Maybe, but there are other ways to handle this. Smarter ways. She tapped the folder. I've got 3 days' worth of research here. Social media posts that contradict their public stories. Financial records that show questionable transactions. Witness statements from Brandon's ex-colleagues about his actual business practices. If you want to expose them, you've got the ammunition. I looked at the folder, then at Ali. What would you do? Honestly, I'd burn them to the ground, but I'm vindictive. She smiled. You're better than I am. You'll probably just want to have a conversation, set some boundaries, protect yourself legally. You don't know me as well as you think, I said. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about Brandon. I remembered teaching him to ride a bike, sitting through terrible school plays, staying up all night when he had the flu. I remembered his father's funeral, how Brandon had held my hand and promised he'd take care of me. When had the promises stopped meaning anything? At 3 a.m, I got up and went to my office. I pulled out the folder Ali had left and started reading every page, memorizing every detail. By the time the sun came up, I had a plan. It wasn't a conversation, it wasn't boundaries, it was something else entirely. Wednesday afternoon, I drove to Brandon's office. He worked in a sleek building downtown, all glass and steel, the kind of place that was designed to impress. Lawson Consulting occupied a suite on the 15th floor. I'd only been there once before, shortly after he'd started the company. The receptionist, a young woman with perfect makeup and a practiced smile, looked up as I entered. Can I help you? I'm here to see Brandon Lawson. I'm his mother. Her smile brightened. Oh, Mrs. Lawson, let me check if he's available. She picked up the phone, pressed a button. Brandon, your mother is here. Okay. She hung up. He'll be right out. I sat in one of the leather chairs and waited. The office had that new money feel. Expensive furniture, abstract art on the walls, a coffee machine that probably cost more than my first car. Everything chosen to project success. Brandon emerged from a hallway, wearing a suit that fit him too well to be off the rack. "Mom, what a surprise. Is everything okay?" "Everything's fine," I said. "I was in the neighborhood and thought I'd stop by. Do you have a few minutes?" He glanced at his watch, a Rolex I didn't remember him owning, and nodded. "Sure, come on back." His office was corner-facing, with windows that overlooked the city. The desk was massive, dark wood, with 2 monitors and a leather chair that looked like it belonged in a CEO's suite. On the wall behind his desk hung his college diploma and several framed awards I didn't recognize. "Nice office," I said, taking a seat in one of the visitor chairs. "Thanks. We're doing pretty well." He sat behind his desk, and I noticed the subtle shift in his posture, the way he positioned himself higher than me. Power dynamics. "So what brings you by?" "I wanted to talk about the wedding." "Okay." He leaned back, fingers steepled. "What about it?" "The cost. It seems quite expensive. Are you sure you can afford it?" His expression tightened. "Mum, I appreciate your concern, but I've got it handled." "Do you?" "Because Ali mentioned something interesting. She said the Plaza Hotel charges at least $1,500 per person. With your guest list—" "Wait." Brandon held up his hand. "Why are you talking to Ali about my wedding finances?" "Because I'm concerned about you, because I'm your mother, and I want to make sure you're not in over your head." "I'm 38 years old. I think I can manage my own finances." I smiled. "Of course you can. I'm just curious where the money's coming from. Your business must be doing incredibly well." Something flickered in his eyes, suspicion maybe, or fear. "It is. We've had a great year." "With Roberto Romano's companies?" The silence stretched between us. Brandon's jaw tightened, and when he spoke again, his voice was cooler. "Mom, what exactly are you getting at?" "I'm not getting at anything. I'm just trying to understand my son's life." "You never talked to me about business. You never mentioned Roberto was one of your clients." "Because it's none of your business," he said. And there was the Brandon I'd been seeing more of lately. Defensive, aggressive, treating me like an obstacle instead of his mother. I stood up slowly. "You're right. It's not my business. Just like your wedding isn't my business. Just like my house apparently isn't my business either." His face went pale. "What?" "The loan, Brandon. The $200,000 loan you took out 3 months ago. The one where you forged my signature and used my house as collateral." He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Yes, you do. I've seen the documents. I've verified them with the bank. You committed fraud, Brandon. You could go to prison." He stood up too, his hands flat on the desk. "You can't prove anything." "I can prove everything. I have the original signature card from the bank. I have handwriting analysis. I have 3 lawyers who've reviewed the case and confirmed it's fraud." I wasn't bluffing. Ali had arranged all of that in the last 48 hours. The only question is what I do with that information. Brandon's face had gone from pale to red. "This is insane. Why would you even think I'd do something like that?" "Because you did do it. And you did it because you're desperate. You're trying to fund a lifestyle you can't afford, marry a woman who doesn't love you, and impress people who see you as a means to an end." "Get out," he said. "Gladly." I walked to the door, then turned back. "One more thing. Olivia's been engaged twice before. Both times she left when she found someone with more money. Did you know that?" His silence was answer enough. I left the office, took the elevator down, and walked to my car. My hands were steady. My breathing was calm. I felt more in control than I had in years. Brandon called 30 seconds after I pulled out of the parking lot. I let it go to voicemail. He called again, and again. By the time I got home, I had 7 missed calls and 3 text messages, all variations of, "We need to talk." I deleted them all. That evening, Ali came over with wine and more documents. "How did it go?" she asked. "Exactly as planned." "He's rattled." Good. She poured us both a glass. Now comes the fun part. I've been doing more digging on Olivia and Diana. You're going to love this. She spread photos across my kitchen table, screenshots from social media, Instagram posts, Facebook updates. All of them showed Olivia and Diana at various events, charity galas, art openings, society weddings. Notice anything? Ali asked. I studied the photos. They're always together, like they're joined at the hip. Exactly. And look at the captions. She pointed to one photo from 3 months ago. Olivia in a red dress, Diana beside her, both holding champagne glasses. The caption read, "Mother-daughter date night with my best friend and biggest supporter." So they're close. That's not surprising. Look at this one. Another photo from a year ago. Same pose, same type of event. But this caption read, "Celebrating with Diana, the woman who taught me everything I know about getting what you want." I read it again. That's an odd thing to say. It gets better. Ali pulled out more photos. I went back 5 years in both their social media accounts. Olivia has been engaged 3 times, not twice. The first engagement was when she was 23, right after college. Guy named Matthew Finch, lawyer. They were together for 2 years. What happened? Diana happened. Look at this. She showed me a blog post from an archived website dated 8 years ago. It was written by someone named Jessica Finch, Matthew's sister. The post was titled, "When Gold Diggers Have Stage Mothers." I read the post in silence. Jessica described how Olivia had manipulated Matthew, how Diana had coached her, how they'd worked together to isolate him from his family and convince him to change his will. When Matthew's parents had intervened, Olivia had simply moved on to the next target. "This is a pattern," I said, "a very clear pattern. Diana finds wealthy, eligible men. Olivia pursues them. They get engaged. Diana advises Olivia on how to maximize the financial benefit, either through the marriage itself or through the breakup. It's a grift, Maggie. A long-term, sophisticated grift." And Brandon walked right into it. More like he was pushed. Ali pulled out another document. Remember how I said Roberto's companies were Brandon's only clients? I did some more digging. The contracts are structured so that if Brandon marries Olivia, he gets a 5-year guarantee of work. If he doesn't marry her, the contracts terminate immediately. I felt sick. So he has to marry her or he loses everything. Exactly. And once they're married, Olivia and Diana will have access to everything. His business, his assets, his connections. Within a year, maybe 2, they'll have bled him dry. Then Olivia will file for divorce, take half of whatever's left, and move on to the next target. I stared at the document spread across my table. My son wasn't just making a mistake. He was being systematically destroyed, and he didn't even realize it. "Can we stop the wedding?" I asked. "Not legally. He's an adult. But we can expose them. We can make sure everyone knows what Olivia and Diana really are." Brandon won't believe me. He thinks I'm just a jealous mother. Then we make it impossible to ignore. We gather everything, the social media posts, the witness statements, the financial records. We put it all together in a way that tells the whole story, and then we present it publicly, at a moment when they can't spin it or hide from it. I looked at Ali. "The wedding," she smiled. "The wedding." The next 2 weeks passed in a careful blur of preparation and deception. I played the role of the dutiful mother flawlessly. I attended the rehearsal dinner, smiled for photos, complimented Olivia's dress choices. I acted exactly like the woman they thought I was. Harmless, provincial, irrelevant. Meanwhile, Ali and I built our case like prosecutors preparing for trial. We started with the social media evidence. Ali had a contact who specialized in digital forensics, and he helped us create a comprehensive timeline of Olivia's romantic history. Every engagement, every relationship, every strategic move. We mapped it all out with dates, screenshots, and corroborating evidence. Then we moved to the financial records. This was trickier. Some of it required accessing information that wasn't quite public. But Ali had spent 25 years building relationships with people who knew how to find things. A bank employee who remembered some unusual transactions, an accountant who'd once worked for Roberto's company and had concerns about certain practices, a former colleague of Brandon's who'd been fired when he asked too many questions about where the money was really coming from. We interviewed all of them, recorded their statements, built a narrative that was impossible to dismiss as coincidence or jealousy. The hardest part was the loan documentation. I had to provide the bank with my actual signature samples, sit through meetings with fraud investigators, fill out police reports. Every step of that process felt like a betrayal, even though I knew Brandon had betrayed me first. The detective assigned to my case was a woman in her 40s named Patricia Vance. She reviewed the documents and asked me the obvious question, "Why haven't you pressed charges?" "Because he's my son," I said. She nodded like she understood, but I could see the disappointment in her eyes. She thought I was weak. Maybe I was. "The evidence is solid," she said. "When you're ready to move forward, we'll be ready too." I thanked her and left. I wasn't ready to send Brandon to prison, but I was ready to make sure he understood the consequences of his choices. 10 days before the wedding, Olivia hosted a bridal shower at the Romano estate in Connecticut. It was the kind of event that required an engraved invitation and a gift from the registry that cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. I bought a set of crystal wine glasses, $1,200, and wrapped them carefully. The estate was absurd, 15 acres, a mansion that looked like it had been transported from Tuscany, gardens that required a full-time staff. Diana greeted guests at the door, wearing a cream-colored dress that probably cost more than my car. "Margaret," she said, kissing both my cheeks, "how wonderful that you could make it." "I wouldn't miss it," I said. The shower was held in the garden, under white tents with flower arrangements that must have cost thousands. There were at least 60 women there, all dressed in their finest summer attire, all speaking in the hushed tones of people who were accustomed to being important. I found a seat near the back and watched. Olivia held court like a queen, laughing at jokes, thanking people for gifts, playing the role of the blushing bride. Diana stood beside her, beaming with pride, occasionally whispering something in her daughter's ear. They opened presents for an hour, kitchen appliances they'd never use, decorative items that would go straight into storage, gift cards to stores I'd never heard of. When they got to my crystal glasses, Olivia held them up and smiled. "How thoughtful," she said. "Thank you, Margaret." Diana leaned over and whispered something. Both women laughed. I couldn't hear what was said, but I could imagine. More jokes in Italian, more mockery of the provincial mother-in-law. During the cake service, I excused myself to use the restroom. The house was enormous, full of hallways and rooms that seemed designed to confuse visitors. I, accidentally, took a wrong turn and found myself in what appeared to be Roberto's study. The room was dark, wood-paneled, with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and a massive desk. On the desk were several folders, neatly stacked. I glanced at the doorway, no one in sight, and quickly photographed the visible labels. One folder was labeled Lawson Consulting, Contract Terms. Another was labeled Asset Transfer, Post-Marriage. I photographed everything I could see, then slipped out of the room and returned to the garden. The shower ended with another round of thank yous and air kisses. As I was leaving, Diana caught my arm. "Margaret, a moment." We stepped away from the other guests. Diana's smile was pleasant, but her eyes were cold. "I want to thank you for being so understanding," she said. "Understanding?" "About your role in the wedding. I know it can be difficult when your son gets married. You're no longer the most important woman in his life." I kept my expression neutral. "I'm just happy Brandon found someone he loves." Of course you are, and I'm sure you understand that Olivia and Brandon need space to build their own life together, without too much interference from family. Are you asking me to stay away from my son? I'm suggesting that healthy boundaries are important. Brandon is starting a new chapter. It would be unfortunate if old obligations held him back. Old obligations. She meant me. I appreciate the advice, I said. I'll keep it in mind. Diana's smile widened. I knew you'd be reasonable. See you at the wedding, Margaret. I drove home with my hands tight on the steering wheel. When I got back, I uploaded the photos from Roberto's study to my computer and called Ali. Can you make anything of these? I asked. She was silent for a long moment. Maggie, this is gold. These documents, they're basically a blueprint for stripping Brandon of everything he has. Look at this clause. After the marriage, all business assets get transferred to a joint account, but the account is structured so that Olivia has sole signing authority. Meaning she can take everything and Brandon can't stop her. Exactly. And this other document, it's a post-nuptial agreement. They're planning to have him sign it during the honeymoon. It waives his right to any of Olivia's assets in the event of a divorce, but it doesn't protect his assets at all. Is that even legal? Probably not, but by the time Brandon figures it out and fights it in court, they'll have already liquidated everything. It's brilliant, in a sociopathic way. I thought about Diana's warning about interference, about healthy boundaries, about Brandon starting a new chapter without old obligations. They were going to erase me from his life and then erase him from his own life. We need to move faster, I said. The wedding is in 10 days. I know, I've been thinking about that. Ali's voice was careful. Maggie, what exactly do you want to accomplish here? Do you want to stop the wedding? Do you want to expose them? Do you want to save Brandon from himself? I want them to understand that I'm not some irrelevant old woman they can mock and dismiss. I want Brandon to see what he's chosen over his own mother, and I want Olivia and Diana to know that they made a very serious mistake. That sounds like revenge. Yes, I said, it does. The wedding was set for 3 o'clock on a Saturday afternoon at the Plaza Hotel. 600 guests, a ceremony in the grand ballroom, followed by a reception that would cost more than most people's houses. I had my invitation, relegated to the 5th row, not the 1st, and I had my plan. Ali and I spent the week before the wedding finalizing our presentation. We created a video, 20 minutes long, that told the complete story. It started with Olivia's first engagement to Matthew Finch, including excerpts from Jessica Finch's blog post. Then it moved through the second and third engagements, showing the pattern of behavior, screenshots of social media posts, financial records showing suspicious transactions, witness statements from people who'd seen the grift in action. The second half of the video focused on Brandon, his failed businesses, the fraudulent loan, Roberto's contracts, and their marriage-dependent terms, the post-nuptial agreement, everything laid out in clear, undeniable detail. We ended with a simple statement. This is not a marriage. This is a business arrangement designed to benefit the Romano family at Brandon Lawson's expense. Ali knew someone who worked in event production. For $5,000, money I'd saved from my teaching pension, he agreed to help us. The Plaza's ballroom had a massive projection system for wedding videos. All we had to do was replace Olivia and Brandon's romantic montage with our version. This is going to be brutal, Ali warned me. Are you sure you want to do this? I've never been more sure of anything in my life, I said. The morning of the wedding, I woke at dawn. I did yoga on my bedroom floor, made coffee, ate breakfast slowly. I wanted to be calm, centered, ready. I dressed in a dark blue dress, elegant but not flashy. I wanted to blend in, be unremarkable. Just another wedding guest, happy to celebrate the happy couple. I arrived at the plaza at 2:30. The lobby was already crowded with guests in their finest attire. I saw people I recognized, Brandon's college friends, distant relatives, business associates. Everyone smiling, everyone excited to witness this momentous occasion. I found my seat in the 5th row and watched as the ballroom filled. Diana and Roberto sat in the front row on one side, looking like visiting royalty. The seat next to them, where I should have been, was occupied by one of Olivia's aunts. The ceremony began at 3:15. Brandon stood at the altar, looking nervous and proud in his tuxedo. The music swelled. The doors opened. Olivia appeared in a dress that must have cost $50,000, walking down the aisle on Roberto's arm. She looked beautiful. They both did. The perfect couple, starting their perfect life together. The officiant, some friend of the Romano family, began the ceremony. I barely heard the words. I was too focused on what was coming next. The vows were traditional. Brandon promised to love and cherish Olivia in sickness and health. Olivia promised the same, her voice clear and confident. They exchanged rings. The officiant pronounced them husband and wife. Everyone applauded. Brandon kissed Olivia, and the crowd erupted in cheers. They walked back down the aisle together, beaming, and the guests began moving toward the reception area. The ceremony had taken 30 minutes. The reception would last 5 hours. That gave us plenty of time. Ali found me near the bar. "Everything's set," she whispered. "The video will play during the toast sequence. 20 minutes from now." "And they can't stop it." "Not without causing a bigger scene than the video itself. Trust me." The reception began with cocktails and appetizers. People mingled, took photos, congratulated the happy couple. I stayed near the edge of the crowd, watching and waiting. At 4 o'clock, the wedding planner announced that dinner would be served. Everyone found their assigned seats. I was at table 17, far from the head table, surrounded by people I didn't know. Dinner was elaborate, multiple courses, each more pretentious than the last. I ate mechanically, my attention fixed on the front of the room where Olivia and Brandon sat with their wedding party. Diana kept leaning over to whisper in Olivia's ear. Whatever she was saying made Olivia laugh. Brandon looked happy, relaxed, like a man who thought all his problems were behind him. At 5:30, the toast began. Best man first, then maid of honor, then Diana. She stood with a champagne glass in hand and smiled at the crowd. "I am so honored to welcome Brandon into our family," Diana said. "He is exactly the kind of man we hoped Olivia would marry. Intelligent, ambitious, and so deeply in love with our daughter. Roberto and I could not be more pleased." The crowd applauded. Diana sat down. The wedding planner stepped forward. "And now," she announced, "the bride and groom have prepared a special video to share with all of you. A look back at their love story." The lights dimmed. A screen descended from the ceiling. I felt my heart rate increase. The video began. For the first 5 seconds, it was what everyone expected. Photos of Brandon and Olivia, smiling and happy. Then the image changed. Matthew Finch appeared on screen. Then Jessica Finch's blog post. Then screenshots of social media conversations. I heard gasps from the crowd. Someone said, "What is this?" Brandon stood up. "Stop the video." But it didn't stop. It kept playing. Olivia's second engagement, her third. The pattern becoming undeniable. Financial records appeared on screen, showing suspicious transactions. Witness statements played as audio over the images. Diana rushed toward the front, shouting something in Italian. Roberto followed her, but the video kept playing. Now it showed Brandon, his failed businesses, the fraudulent loan, the forged signature, my house. "Oh my God," someone near me whispered. The final section began. The contracts from Roberto's study. The postnuptial agreement. Everything laid out in simple, brutal clarity. The screen went dark. The lights came up. The ballroom was silent. The silence lasted exactly 3 seconds. Then chaos erupted. Brandon was shouting, his face red, pointing at the projection booth. Olivia sat frozen, her perfect makeup starting to run as tears formed. Diana had her phone out, yelling at someone, the wedding planner, probably, or maybe the hotel manager. Roberto stood behind his wife, his expression unreadable. I stayed in my seat, watched, waited. A man in a hotel uniform rushed to the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, there's been a technical malfunction. If everyone could please remain calm." "That was not a malfunction." Diana's voice cut through the noise. She'd grabbed the microphone from the hotel employee. "Someone sabotaged this wedding. Someone played that disgusting video deliberately." 600 pairs of eyes scanned the room, looking for a culprit. I stood up. The movement drew attention. People near me turned. Then people at other tables. Within seconds, the entire ballroom was looking at me. "You," Diana said, her voice shaking with rage. "You did this." I walked toward the front of the room, slowly, steadily, every eye following me. "Mom," Brandon's voice cracked. "Did you—" "Yes," I said clearly. "I did this." Olivia made a sound like a wounded animal. "How could you? This is our wedding day." "Your wedding day," I repeated. I'd reached the front now, standing just a few feet from the head table. "Your special day. The day you were supposed to begin your new life together, built on lies and fraud, and my forged signature." Brandon moved toward me. "You had no right." "I had every right. You used my house as collateral for a loan I didn't authorize. You committed fraud. You chose these people over your own mother." I turned to address the room. "Everything in that video is documented and verified. The pattern of Olivia's previous engagements, the financial manipulation, the contracts designed to strip Brandon of everything he owns. It's all real." "That's slander," Diana shouted. "We'll sue you for everything you have." "Please do. I'd love to present all that evidence in court." I looked at Roberto. "Especially the documents from your study. The ones labeled asset transfer, post-marriage. Would you like me to explain those to everyone here?" Roberto's face had gone pale. He grabbed Diana's arm, pulling her back, whispering urgently. Brandon was shaking his head. "This is insane. Mom, why would you do this? Because you wouldn't listen. Because you were too arrogant to see what was happening. Because I'm your mother, and whether you appreciate it or not, I still care what happens to you." "You care about me. You just destroyed my wedding." "I destroyed a fraud. Your marriage was never real, Brandon. It was a business arrangement. Olivia was never going to love you. She was going to marry you, take everything you have, and move on to the next target, just like she did with Matthew Finch, just like she did with David Brennan, just like she did with James Hutchinson." I saw recognition flash across some faces in the crowd. People pulled out their phones, probably searching those names, confirming what I'd said. Olivia was crying harder now. "That's not true. I love Brandon. This is all lies." "Then explain the post-nuptial agreement," I said. "The one you were planning to have him sign during your honeymoon. The one that protects all your assets, but leaves his completely vulnerable." Silence again. Olivia looked at Diana, then at Roberto. Neither of them spoke. Brandon turned to Olivia. "Is that true? Is there an agreement?" "It's standard," Diana said quickly. "Just a financial protection for both parties." "But it's not for both parties, is it?" I pulled out my phone, opened the photo I'd taken in Roberto's study. "I have a copy of the agreement right here. Would you like me to read the relevant sections?" "Don't you dare," Diana hissed. I read it anyway, loud enough for everyone to hear. The clauses that gave Olivia complete control of joint accounts. The clauses that prevented Brandon from accessing his own business assets. The clauses that essentially made him financially dependent on the Romano family. When I finished, the ballroom was so quiet I could hear my own breathing. Brandon looked at Olivia. "You were going to do this to me?" "It's not what it looks like," Olivia said, but her voice was weak. "It's exactly what it looks like." I turned back to the crowd. "I want everyone here to understand something. I didn't do this to hurt my son. I did this to save him. From a woman who sees him as a means to an end. From a family that was planning to use him and discard him. From a marriage that would have destroyed him financially and emotionally. "You're a bitter old woman," Diana spat. "You can't stand to see your son happy." "I'd love to see my son happy, but this," I gestured at the scene around us, "this isn't happiness. This is a trap." Brandon stood there, his tuxedo perfect, his hair styled just right, looking like everything he'd always wanted to be. And he was falling apart. "Everyone leave," he said quietly. No one moved. "I said leave," his voice cracked. "Get out, all of you. The wedding is over." People began moving, slowly at first, then faster. Whispered conversations, shocked faces, phones out, already spreading the story to people who weren't there. Within 10 minutes, the ballroom was nearly empty. Just family remained. Diana and Roberto, Olivia, Brandon, and me. Diana pointed at me. "You will pay for this. We will sue you. We will destroy you." "With what evidence?" Ali's voice came from behind me. She'd emerged from wherever she'd been hiding, holding a thick folder. "With the forged loan documents, the fraudulent contracts, the witness statements from Olivia's previous fiancés. Please, take me to court. I'll enjoy it." Roberto grabbed Diana's arm again. "We're leaving. Now." "We're not done," Diana started. "Yes, we are." Roberto looked at Brandon. "I'm sorry this didn't work out. The business contracts are void as of today. You understand." They left. Olivia stood there for a moment, her dress a cloud of white silk, her makeup ruined, her perfect wedding destroyed. She looked at Brandon like she wanted to say something. Then she turned and followed her parents. The ballroom was empty except for Brandon, Ali, and me. Brandon sank into a chair. He still held his champagne glass, though most of the champagne had spilled. He stared at nothing. "Brandon," I said gently, "don't." He didn't look at me. "Just don't. You need to understand. I understand that my mother just ruined my life. I understand that everyone I know just saw me humiliated. I understand that I'm now jobless, single, and completely alone." His voice was flat, empty. "I understand all of that perfectly. You were going to be worse than alone. You were going to be trapped in a marriage that would have destroyed you. You don't know that. Maybe Olivia really did love me. Maybe it would have worked out. Do you really believe that?" He finally looked at me. His eyes were red. "It doesn't matter what I believe anymore. You made sure of that." Ali stepped forward. "Brandon, your mother saved you from committing fraud, from losing everything, from—" "I don't need a lawyer. I need my mother to leave me alone." He stood up. "Go home, Mom. You got what you wanted. You destroyed my wedding. You proved you were right. Now just go." "Brandon, go." I went. I drove home in a daze. The city blurred past my windows. By the time I pulled into my driveway, it was dark. The house was exactly as I'd left it that morning. Quiet, empty, mine. I sat in the car for a long time. My phone buzzed constantly. Text messages from people at the wedding. Calls from relatives who'd heard what happened. I ignored all of them. Finally, I went inside, poured a glass of wine, sat at my kitchen table, surrounded by the folders and documents and evidence that had destroyed my son's wedding day. Had I done the right thing? The question kept circling in my mind. I'd exposed the truth. I'd saved Brandon from a terrible marriage. I'd protected my house, my financial security. By any objective measure, I'd won. So why did I feel sick? Ali called at 10. "You okay?" "I don't know." "You did what you had to do, Maggie. Brandon will understand eventually." "Will he? Or will he just hate me forever?" "He's hurt right now, embarrassed. Give him time." "How much time? Years? Decades?" Ali sighed. "I don't know. But you couldn't let him marry her. You know that." I knew that, but knowing something intellectually and feeling it emotionally were two different things. Sunday morning, I woke up to 17 missed calls from Brandon. Hope flared in my chest. Maybe he wanted to talk, to reconcile, to understand. I called him back. "Mom?" His voice was rough. "We need to talk. Can you come over?" "Of course. When?" "Now." I drove to his apartment, a sleek condo downtown that I'd only visited twice. Brandon answered the door in sweatpants and a t-shirt. He looked like he hadn't slept. "Come in," he said. The apartment was a mess. Wedding gifts still in boxes. Olivia's things scattered everywhere. A bottle of whiskey on the coffee table, mostly empty. Brandon sat on the couch. I took the chair across from him. "I've been thinking," he said, "about everything you said, about the video, about Olivia and her family. And you were right, about a lot of it, maybe even most of it." He rubbed his face. "I talked to Olivia last night, after everyone left. She admitted there was a post-nuptial agreement. She said it was just standard protection. But when I pressed her on the details, she couldn't explain why it was so one-sided." Relief washed over me. "So you understand why I had to—" "No." He cut me off. "I understand that Olivia and her family were using me, but that doesn't mean what you did was right. Brendan, you humiliated me in front of 600 people. You destroyed my reputation. You made me look like an idiot and a victim. Do you have any idea what that feels like? I was trying to protect you. By humiliating me. By airing all my failures in front of everyone I know." He laughed bitterly. "Some protection. What did you want me to do? Let you marry her? Let her take everything? I wanted you to talk to me, to show me the evidence privately, to give me a chance to make my own decision." He stood up, pacing. "But you didn't trust me to do that. You didn't believe I could handle the truth. So you took control, like you always do. That's not fair. Isn't it? You've been controlling my life since I was a kid, telling me which college to attend, which major to choose, which job to take. I finally thought I was building something on my own, and you couldn't stand it. I never— Yes, you did. Because God forbid Brandon make his own choices. God forbid he have something that isn't approved by Margaret Lawson." His voice was rising. "I'm 38 years old and you still treat me like I'm 12. Because you act like you're 12. You forged my signature on a loan. You committed fraud. You were about to marry a woman who was planning to steal everything you had. Those aren't the actions of a responsible adult. And humiliating me at my own wedding is." We stared at each other. The silence was heavy, ugly. "I think you should leave," Brandon said finally. "We're not done talking." "Yes, we are. I need time, space. I need to figure out what I'm doing with my life without you hovering over me, fixing all my problems." "I'm your mother. It's my job to fix your problems." "Not anymore." He walked to the door, opened it. "I appreciate what you were trying to do, really, but I can't have you in my life right now." The words hit me like a physical blow. "You don't mean that." "I do. I love you, Mom. But I need you to leave me alone." I stood there, frozen. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. I'd saved him. He was supposed to be grateful, relieved, understanding. Instead, he was asking me to leave. "For how long?" I asked quietly. "I don't know. Months. Maybe longer. I'll call you when I'm ready." "Brandon, please, Mom, just go." I went. The next 3 weeks were the worst of my life. Brandon didn't call, didn't text, didn't respond to my messages. I tried giving him space, tried respecting his wishes, but every day that passed felt like a wound deepening. The story of the wedding disaster spread through our social circle like wildfire. Some people thought I was a hero. Others thought I was vindictive and cruel. A few stopped talking to me entirely. I didn't care what they thought. I only cared about Brandon. Ali came over frequently, bringing food and companionship. "He'll come around," she kept saying. "Give him time." But time felt like my enemy. Every day Brandon was alone, hurt, probably drinking too much and making decisions without anyone to guide him. 2 weeks after the wedding, I got a call from Patricia Vance, the detective handling the fraud case. Mrs. Lawson, I wanted to update you. We've completed our investigation of the loan fraud. The evidence is solid. We're ready to file charges whenever you give the word. What would happen to Brandon? I asked. Given the amount involved and the nature of the fraud, he's looking at felony charges. Probably 2 to 5 years in prison if convicted. 2 to 5 years. I imagine Brandon in prison. My son. The baby I'd rocked to sleep. The boy I'd taught to ride a bike. I need more time, I said. Mrs. Lawson, with all respect, the longer we wait, the weaker the case becomes. If you want justice... I don't want justice. I want my son back. I hung up. That evening, I sat in my garden and looked at the roses I'd been tending for years. They were beautiful, perfect, the result of careful attention and patience. I'd been patient with the roses, but not with Brandon. I'd acted quickly, decisively, without giving him a chance to see the truth for himself. Maybe he was right. Maybe I had been controlling. My phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. Hello? Mrs. Lawson? A woman's voice, young, nervous. This is Emma Hutchinson. We've never met, but you know my brother, James Hutchinson. He was engaged to Olivia Carter. My breath caught. Yes, I know about James. I heard what you did. At the wedding, someone posted a video online. She laughed, a sharp sound. I just wanted to call and say thank you for exposing them, for stopping them from doing to your son what they did to my brother. What did they do to James? They destroyed him, financially, emotionally, all of it. By the time Olivia left, James had lost his business, his savings, everything. He tried to warn people about them, but no one believed him. Diana threatened to sue him for defamation. He gave up. Where is James now? Phoenix, starting over. He's doing better, but it took years. Emma paused. Mrs. Lawson, I know your son is probably angry with you right now, but you saved him. Please don't forget that. After we hung up, I cried. For the first time since the wedding, I let myself break down completely. I'd saved Brandon. Emma was right, but the cost had been so high. 3 weeks after the wedding, I finally decided to act. I couldn't keep waiting for Brandon to call. I couldn't keep hoping he'd forgive me on his own timeline. I drove to his apartment. His car was in the parking lot, so I knew he was home. I went up to his floor, knocked on his door. No answer. I knocked again. Brandon, it's Mum. Please. We need to talk. Nothing. I know you're angry. I know I handled this badly, but you're my son, and I love you, and I'm not giving up on us. The door opened. Brandon stood there, looking thinner, exhausted. Mom, don't send me away, please. Just give me 5 minutes. He hesitated, then stepped aside. I went in. The apartment was cleaner than last time. Olivia's things were gone. The wedding gifts had been removed. It looked like he was trying to erase all evidence of the relationship. How are you? I asked. I've been better. He sat on the couch. I sat beside him, careful to leave space between us. I've been doing a lot of thinking, I said, about what you said, about me being controlling. And you're right, I have been, for years. Brandon looked surprised. I thought I was protecting you, guiding you, but I was really just trying to keep you from making mistakes, because I was afraid of losing you, of becoming irrelevant in your life. I took a breath. I'm sorry, Brandon, for humiliating you, for not trusting you to handle the truth, for acting like I always know what's best. Mom, I'm not done. I'm also sorry for waiting 3 weeks to say this. I should have come sooner. I should have fought harder for us instead of just giving you space. I looked at him. You're my only child. Losing you would destroy me, but I'd rather lose you than keep hurting you with my need to control everything. Brandon was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was softer. I've been thinking, too, about Olivia, about the wedding, about everything you uncovered. And I'm grateful, really. If you hadn't done what you did, I'd be married to her right now. She'd probably be draining my bank accounts while I was still on the honeymoon. He laughed, but it was sad. I was so blind, so stupid. You weren't stupid. You were in love, or you thought you were. Was I, though? Or was I just in love with the idea of being successful enough to land someone like Olivia? He shook his head. I don't even know anymore. It doesn't matter now. What matters is that you're safe, you're here, and you have a chance to rebuild. With what? Roberto cancelled all my contracts. My business is basically finished. I'm broke, Mom. Completely broke. Then we'll figure it out. Together. He looked at me. You're really not going to press charges? For the loan? No, you're my son. I'm not sending you to prison. I stole from you. You made a terrible choice, but I've made plenty of those too. I reached over and took his hand. We're family, Brandon. That means something. It means we forgive each other, even when it's hard. He squeezed my hand, and for the first time in weeks, I felt a small spark of hope. The following months were difficult but necessary. Brandon moved back into my house temporarily, sleeping in his old childhood bedroom while he figured out his next steps. It was awkward at first. Two adults who'd spent years building separate lives suddenly forced to coexist in close quarters. But slowly, carefully, we started to rebuild our relationship. Brandon got a job at a small marketing firm, entry level, a massive step down from running his own consulting business. But he showed up every day, worked hard, and didn't complain. I saw glimpses of the boy I'd raised, the one who'd been ambitious but also kind, driven but also thoughtful. We had dinner together most evenings. At first, we talked about safe topics, work, weather, neighborhood gossip. Then, gradually, we started talking about harder things. The wedding, Olivia, his father's passing and how it had shaped both of us. My fears about being alone, his fears about never being successful enough. It wasn't always comfortable. Sometimes we argued. Sometimes old patterns resurfaced, me trying to give advice, him bristling at my interference. But we were trying. That was what mattered. 6 months after the wedding, Brandon came home with news. I ran into someone today, he said. Matthew Finch, Olivia's first fiancé. Really? What did he say? That he'd heard what happened. That he was glad someone finally stopped her. Brandon sat at the kitchen table. We talked for almost an hour. About Olivia, about Diana and how they operate. He told me things I never knew. Things that would have been red flags if I'd been paying attention. Like what? Like how Diana isolated him from his family. How Olivia would pick fights whenever he tried to spend time with his parents or siblings. How they slowly took over his finances, making him dependent on them. He looked at me. Sound familiar? Very. Matthew said the day his sister Jessica wrote that blog post was the day he finally understood what was happening. But by then, it was too late. Olivia had already moved on to the next target. Did he ever find out why they do it, Diana and Olivia? He thinks Diana married Roberto for money and access, but it wasn't enough. She wanted more, status, power, control. So she trained Olivia to do the same thing. It's like a family business for them. Emotional fraud. I thought about that. About women who taught their daughters to see men as resources rather than people. About the damage that kind of worldview caused, not just to the victims, but to the perpetrators themselves. Do you ever miss her? I asked. Olivia? Brandon considered the question. I miss who I thought she was. The version of her that laughed at my jokes and made me feel like I was the most important person in the room. But that person wasn't real. She was a performance. So, no, I don't miss Olivia. I miss the illusion. That's very mature of you. Therapy helps. He grinned. You were right about that too. Though don't let it go to your head. I raised my hands. Wouldn't dream of it. 8 months after the wedding, Brandon moved into his own apartment again. It was small, nothing like the luxury condo he'd had before, but it was his, paid for with his own money from his new job. No loans, no fraud, no shortcuts. The day he moved out, I helped him carry boxes. When we finished, we stood in his empty living room, and I felt a familiar tightness in my chest. Saying goodbye, even temporarily, was hard. "You're going to be okay," I said. "I know, because of you. Because of you. You chose to rebuild. You chose to learn from your mistakes. I just gave you a push in the right direction." "A push?" He laughed. "Mum, you blew up my entire life." "Well, yes, there was that. For which I'm grateful, even if it took me a while to admit it." He hugged me, and I held on tight, thinking about all the years between us. The fights and the reconciliations, the mistakes and the forgiveness, the complicated, messy, beautiful business of being family. "Mom," he said, pulling back, "I need to tell you something." "What?" "I heard from Olivia last week. She called." My stomach dropped. What did she want? To apologize, to explain, to see if there was any chance we could work things out. And I told her no, that what we had was fake, and I wasn't interested in pretending anymore. He smiled. "She didn't take it well, but I stood firm. You would have been proud." I was proud, so incredibly proud. "There's something else," Brandon said. "Diana and Roberto are getting divorced. Apparently, the wedding disaster damaged Roberto's reputation badly enough that it hurt his business. He blames Diana for the whole thing, for pushing Olivia into these schemes, for prioritizing money over everything else. Do you know what happened to Olivia? She moved back to Italy with Diana. Last I heard, they're looking for their next target, some European businessman." He shook his head. "I hope someone warns him before it's too late." I thought about calling Emma Hutchinson, about trying to warn this hypothetical businessman ourselves. But I knew it wouldn't help. Men like that, like Brandon had been, needed to learn their own lessons. Outside intervention rarely worked. Sometimes you had to let people make their own mistakes. Unless they were your son, then you burned down their wedding and destroyed their lives to save them. No regrets.